Have you ever walked away from a conversation and then, hours later, suddenly remembered something you said? Maybe you were lying in bed. Maybe you were taking a shower. Maybe you were trying to focus on something completely unrelated. And suddenly your brain says, wait, why did I say that? What did they mean by that? Did I sound stupid? Why did they pause before answering? Maybe they were judging me. And then somehow a 5-minute conversation becomes a 30-minute investigation inside your head. You replay their words, their facial expression, your tone, the exact moment they looked away. And then your brain starts creating alternative versions of what you could have said. I should have said this. Why didn't I think of that? If I had responded differently, maybe the conversation would have gone better. And the strangest part? The other person may have completely forgotten the conversation, but you're still living inside it. So why does this happen? Why does the brain replay conversations long after they are over? And more importantly, why does your mind sometimes turn an ordinary conversation into something much bigger than it actually was? The answer begins with something your brain is constantly trying to do: protect you from future pain. Your brain is not designed simply to remember things. It's designed to learn from them. When something feels socially uncomfortable, embarrassing, confusing, or emotionally important, your brain may treat it as something worth analyzing. It starts asking, what happened? Why did it happen? What did I do? And how can I prevent this from happening again? In other words, overthinking can sometimes be your brain's attempt to protect you. Imagine you have a conversation with someone you care about. You make a joke. They don't laugh. There's a 2-second silence. The conversation continues. Nothing dramatic happens. But later that night, your brain remembers that 2-second silence. And suddenly, what if they didn't like the joke? What if they thought I was weird? What if everyone noticed? What if they secretly dislike me? Notice what happened. The original event was small, but your interpretation of the event became enormous. And this is one of the biggest reasons people replay conversations. The brain doesn't always replay what happened. Sometimes it replays what it thinks happened. There is a difference. Your memory isn't a perfect recording. When you remember a conversation, you're not simply pressing play on a video stored inside your brain. You're reconstructing the event, and your current emotions can influence that reconstruction. If you're already insecure, a neutral facial expression might suddenly look like rejection. If you're afraid someone is angry with you, their short reply might feel hostile. If you already believe you embarrassed yourself, your brain may search the conversation for evidence that confirms it. This creates a psychological loop. You remember the conversation. You interpret it negatively. That interpretation creates anxiety. The anxiety makes you analyze the conversation even more. And the more you analyze it, the more important and threatening the conversation begins to feel. So you replay it again, and again, and again. It's almost like your brain believes, if I analyze this enough, eventually I'll find the perfect explanation. But sometimes, there is no perfect explanation. Maybe they were tired. Maybe they were distracted. Maybe they had their own problems. Maybe their expression had nothing to do with you. Maybe the conversation was completely normal, but an overthinking brain doesn't like uncertainty. It wants answers. And when an answer isn't available, it starts creating possibilities. That's where the dangerous question begins. What if? What if they misunderstood me? What if they don't like me? What if I sounded desperate? What if I said too much? What if I didn't say enough? What if they tell someone else? What if I ruined everything? The problem with what-if thinking is that your brain can generate an unlimited number of possibilities, and most of them don't require evidence. One possibility becomes another, then another, and suddenly you're emotionally reacting to a situation that exists mostly inside your imagination. This is why overthinking can feel physically exhausting. Your body may respond to an imagined social threat almost as if it were happening right now. Your heart may beat faster. Your muscles may tense. You may feel embarrassed again. You may feel anxious. Even though the conversation ended hours ago, your body's in the present, but your mind is back in the past. And there is another reason people replay conversations. They want control. Think about it. If you could go back and change what you said, you might feel safer. So your brain keeps editing the past. You imagine different responses, different words, different facial expressions, different endings. I should have said this instead, but here's the uncomfortable truth. You cannot edit a conversation that has already happened. You can only learn from it. And there is a huge difference between learning and replaying. Learning asks, what can I do differently next time? Overthinking asks, how many times can I punish myself for what already happened? One helps you grow, the other keeps you trapped. And sometimes people don't replay conversations because they think they did something wrong. They replay them because the conversation mattered to them. Maybe you really like that person. Maybe you want their approval. Maybe you are afraid of losing the relationship. Maybe their opinion matters deeply to you. The more emotionally important someone is, the more attention your brain may give to their behavior. That's why you might not care about a strange interaction with a random person, but one slightly awkward conversation with someone you love, you could think about it for 3 days. Because you're not simply analyzing words, you're analyzing the possibility of losing something important. And this is where insecurity can make the cycle even stronger. If deep down you believe you're not interesting enough, not attractive enough, not intelligent enough, or not worthy enough, then your brain may interpret ambiguous situations through those beliefs. A person doesn't reply immediately. Your brain says, they don't care about me. Someone seems quiet. Your brain says, I must have done something. Someone disagrees with you. Your brain says, they probably don't respect me. The brain often looks for explanations that match what we already fear. So sometimes the real problem isn't the conversation. It's the story you tell yourself about the conversation. And here's something else people forget. You are probably much more noticeable to yourself than you are to other people. You remember your awkward sentence because you experienced it from inside your own mind. But other people are experiencing their own lives. They're thinking about their problems, their responsibilities, their relationships, their appearance, their mistakes, their own conversations. You might be spending hours analyzing the moment you stumbled over a sentence, while the other person may not remember it at all. This doesn't mean your feelings aren't real. It means your interpretation may not be the only possible interpretation. So what can you do when your brain starts replaying a conversation? First, separate facts from assumptions. Ask yourself, what do I actually know? Maybe they gave you a short reply. That's a fact. They're angry with me is an interpretation. Maybe they looked away. That's a fact. They were judging me is an assumption. This simple distinction can weaken the overthinking loop. Second, ask, if my friend told me this exact story, what would I tell them? We are often much kinder to other people than we are to ourselves. You might tell your friend, it's probably nothing. Don't overthink it. Everyone says awkward things sometimes, but when it happens to you, suddenly you're the prosecutor, the judge, and the jury. Try giving yourself the same compassion you would give someone you care about. Third, don't try to achieve certainty about another person's thoughts. You cannot read minds. You don't know exactly what someone was thinking. And you don't need to. Sometimes uncertainty is simply part of being human. You can say, I don't know what they meant, and I don't need to know right now. That sentence can be surprisingly powerful. And finally, learn to recognize when reflection has turned into rumination. Reflection moves forward. Rumination moves in circles. Reflection says, I learned something. Rumination says, let's replay it one more time. Reflection gives you a lesson. Rumination gives you another reason to doubt yourself. So the next time you find yourself lying in bed, replaying a conversation, pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, am I trying to learn from this? Or am I trying to change the past? Because you don't need to find the perfect sentence you should have said. You don't need to perfectly control how everyone perceives you. And you don't need to examine every facial expression for hidden meaning. Sometimes you said something awkward. Sometimes someone misunderstood you. Sometimes a conversation simply didn't go perfectly, and that's okay. You are allowed to have imperfect conversations. You are allowed to be misunderstood. You are allowed to say the wrong thing sometimes. You are allowed to be human. The goal isn't to create a mind that never overthinks. The goal is to create a mind that knows when to stop. Because peace doesn't come from finding an explanation for everything. Sometimes peace comes from accepting that you don't have one. So if you're replaying a conversation in your head tonight, remember this: the conversation is over. You don't have to keep living inside it. Take the lesson if there is one. Leave the guilt behind and let the moment become what it was always supposed to become, a moment in the past.